Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for watching the video. My name is Susanne. I'm here with Dr. Joe Dispenza. We're here in Baden in the Netherlands today, and it's very cold. But we've had an amazing day doing Breaking the Habit of Being You Level 1. Tomorrow we're going to do Level 2. And we've just had the first day, which was quite amazing. So I'm very grateful to be able to be here and that you take some time out to talk a little bit with me.
Sure.
And while we're on the subject of gratefulness and gratitude, which is really usually the thing that we end with after we've done something or after we've had this amazing experience. But you teach us to really look at that before the event.
Yeah, well, there's two really paradigms, two specific paradigms of reality that are about what's called Newtonian physics, which is cause and effect. That something happens to us in our environment, and when the experience happens, it changes us internally, and then we react to that condition. And when we react to the condition, we begin to function at effect of something outside of us. If something good happens to us and we react positively, then we give thanks after the experience happens. Really, but either way, we're pretty much victims of destiny. The quantum model of reality says that mind and matter aren't separate like that. That subjective mind somehow has an effect on the objective world. So then, if you begin to piece this together, that you can have a clear intention of what you want, but then to move into the state of how you would feel if it already happened. Gratitude is an emotional signature that the event is already done. So if you can teach your body emotionally what it feels like to have the event already happen, and you can get in touch with that, then your body as the unconscious mind doesn't know the difference between the experience that produces the emotion and the emotion that you fabricate or create by thought alone. And when we move into a state of being where mind and body are working together, or our thoughts and feelings are aligned, there are biological changes that happen in the brain and body, and we move into that state of being, and when we're in that state of being, the universe begins to organize itself to reflect that new state of being.
And how does that happen?
Well, the short story to all of that is that, we can begin to make measurable changes in reality by allowing ourselves to create a new personality. So if you begin to see that what you're doing inside of you, changing how you think and feel, produces an effect outside of you, you're no longer a victim of cause and effect, but now you're causing an effect. So in order to explain the answer to that question, you have to merge several different idealisms, from quantum physics to neuroscience and mind, to the neuroendocrinology of emotions, how emotions signal genes, how genes prepare the body, for its destiny. So I think the best way to describe it is that when we move into a new state of being and we're no longer thinking, acting, and feeling in the same way, there should be physiological and physical changes as a result of it. And if we just simply make different choices because we're being differently, we're certainly going to head to a new future.
I think it's fascinating. And the part that I always understand quite well is the neuropsychology part of it, because that's more of my background, it's more tangible almost. And then we also have the spiritual component, which is for a lot of people more, well, you can't really grab it, and it's more sort of out there. And what you are really doing is combining all these components, like you've just said. Is your work also, or let me rephrase, can people do the process that you're teaching when they do not have anything with spirituality, when they are not believers, so to say?
Well, let me answer the question in two ways. The first way is that I think science has become the contemporary language of spiritualism. Yeah, because what science does really well is it doesn't exclude anybody. When you start talking about cultures or traditions or religions, you're going to segregate an audience. So the language that we use to describe the miraculous, to describe the way the nature of reality really is that we have to really work on combining several different aspects so that people can build a model of understanding so that it gives them permission to do the uncommon. Now, that being said, when I started studying spontaneous remissions from high blood pressure, and arrhythmias, and thyroid conditions, and chronic pain, and MS, and lupus, and on, I found some strong correlations with what they were doing inside of them that produced a result in their body. So I said, well, you know, something happens once, it's an incident. If it happens twice, it's a coincidence. If it starts happening 3 and 4 and 5 times, now we're looking at a trend or a law. So that's when I really immersed myself and went back to school and got a degree in neuroscience, because there had to be something happening in the mind and brain to produce that. So then I thought, well, if these people in 17 different countries produce this result for themselves, well, let's demystify this and let's see if we can reproduce it by teaching people to do the same thing that we did here today. And so if we can teach people what those people did to produce or exert measurable changes in their bodies or in their lives, then we're beginning to close the gap between science and spirituality. And so in the last 2 years or so, Susanna, by just teaching the workshops that we're doing around the world, we've had people really heal themselves. So we've really created a model that's based on the common person that has no background in any science, that they just figured out, look, man, I got diagnosed here and I got to change. And they started to really take on, first of all, a spiritual idealism, and then begin to contemplate what that really means. And they had to shed some old beliefs about traditional religion. And then they had to look at, you know, the last 20 or 30 years of their life and how they were living, and begin to look at their thoughts and behaviors and emotions. And they began to break the habit of being themselves, and then they wanted to reinvent a new self. And they did it with such passion that not only did they neurologically and biologically change the brain and body, but they literally left themselves, the old self, behind. And so because of the frontal lobe and our ability to make thought more real than anything else, it allowed me to kind of formulate a model of the closest as I can come to how to reproduce the effects. And so you don't have to be spiritual or scientific at all. You just have to be practical. That's it.
Is there anything else that you sort of need to have when it comes to intelligence or awareness? Is there any minimal requirements, or can anyone do it?
Well, we come preloaded with all the neurological and biological machinery to change. And, you know, we have an amazing forebrain that allows us to pay attention to how we're thinking, acting, and feeling, to notice who we're being. And we have it there in place so that we can modify our behavior to produce different results in our life. But most people, you know, if they're living at effect of their environment, pretty much they're reacting and not really using the forebrain to begin to design a new destiny. So species in evolution are confronting tough environmental conditions, and as they are exposed to the same conditions over time, they finally modify their behaviors and they change their genes. But we don't have to wait millions of lifetimes to do that. As a matter of fact, we can do it in one lifetime. And so we have all the equipment to make it happen. So I think that you know, a willingness to be uncomfortable, a ability to pay attention and to focus, a passion to know, but there isn't any intelligence that's necessary to do this.
So it's really about making a true decision, like you've talked about.
Sometimes, you know, intelligence actually gets in the way. You know, because you start overanalyzing. Right?
Yeah.
Simple people tend to do this really well, and simple people are like children. They just accept and they do it. And the analytical mind of the scientist or the theologian tends to overanalyze and, you know, we get in our own way at times.
Yeah, yeah. Stay out of the practical part and more about the thinking part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. And what can we do, because we can understand it and really experience how it is, like you've done the meditations with us today. But you know, the day goes by and then you say, oh, I forgot to do it again, and then, you know, a week went by. So do you have any ideas how we can stay aware, how we can remind ourselves to be aware, to look at it again?
Yeah, there's only two ways. You either decide after tragedy or crisis to change or loss, or you pick and choose yourself before it happens. So I think the only thing that people need is the correlation between their inward journey and the outward effect. The moment you create something in your life as the result of your efforts, or you have a breakthrough and your energy changes, or you heal yourself, or you create a new job exactly the way you want, and you know that you did that, then it's not like the meditation is a discipline that you have to do, and you know, it's to be spiritual or whatever. You're doing it because you love the fact of what it does and creates. So it becomes instrumental after a period of time. And so I think the only element is really just doing it for long enough that something magical happens. And when you see that magical thing happen, and you know that without a doubt that it was the result of your efforts, boy, it changes a lot for people.
And I guess that's conditioning in itself already, right?
It absolutely is conditioning, it absolutely is.
Yeah. Because you talk a lot about associative learning, conditioning, and what if someone would like to step out of their old self, but the old conditionings are so strong that they need this new trigger or decision that has so much energy, because you say, well, you just have to make sure that the new, I'm not sure if I'm saying it correctly, but the new decision has more energy than the old behavior?
The energy of the new decision has more energy than the emotion of that addiction that keeps us connected. The biggest reason we stop doing meditation or we stop making an inward journey is really just because people use feelings as a barometer of change. So if they weigh like doing a meditation against going to the movies or going out to dinner, getting on the internet, a lot of times people will trade the external environment for the internal journey because there's more emotional gratification in terms of pleasure. But that really doesn't really mark any specific change for people. So, it's an interesting idea, but this associative memory that we're talking about is based on addiction. And so, it's the same thing as Pavlovian conditioning. The dog, after a period of time, hears the bell and begins to salivate because it associates the bell with food. You take the food away and it hears the bell and it salivates. Well, you walk out into your life and you're addicted emotionally. And the moment you see the person that represents that addiction, or you go to the place, and it begins to, by associative memory, subconsciously, just like the dog beginning to salivate, you begin to autonomically or automatically return back to your old self because your physiology begins to change just like the dog. So until we get into the operating system and we begin to make those changes, which we're going to talk about tomorrow, we wind up pretty much really trying to change, but we never really address the major components of it. We're dancing around the core.
Yeah. And you've told us earlier that once we get to the cerebellum, then we get to the programming, and we need to, or we want to decrease activity in most parts of the brain and enhance activity in the frontal lobe. Is that always a positive thing, or can we also enhance frontal lobe activity but in a negative way? Is that possible?
Well, let's see how I can answer this. Well, if you look at somebody who's autistic, they have an overactive frontal lobe. It's so overactive that they're lowering the volume to time and space. They're not paying attention to their environment too much. And so in certain conditions with trauma, sometimes the frontal lobe gets overactive. And when it gets overactive, people tend to either become imbalanced with their interaction with the environment because the brain can't create coherence between the outer world and the inner world. But for the most part, a healthy functioning frontal lobe has some directives that make it so unique. For example, when you're learning something new, the novelty of that experience is activating the right frontal lobe. But the moment it begins to become routine, it starts to activate the left frontal lobe. And what neuroscience is beginning to discover is that the left frontal lobe tends to be the happy spot.
Happy spot, that's good to know.
Because when you really tackle some abstraction, and you can create a really sound model, and you can revisit that model and build it, as you begin to increase your attention span and you begin to develop this idea, and it becomes routine and familiar, the brain begins to love that. It begins to function at a higher capacity. And now the forebrain is controlling the hindbrain, instead of when we live by emotion, the hindbrain controlling the forebrain. So the reason that not a lot of information really comes out about healthy frontal lobes is because the majority of the time science is studying strokes and head injuries and trauma, and they're seeing what happens in the absence of a healthy functioning frontal lobe. But now that a lot of experienced meditators or nuns that move into a state of reverie when they pray, or athletes that really have dynamic focus, that now we're measuring the changes because we're measuring effects of subjective mind. But if you don't have anybody who can pay attention, then you really draw some limited conclusions about how the brain works, because there's no owner's manual. We basically learn by trial and error, but if you learn the manual and you learn from it, then things get a little bit simpler. So I think we're beginning to get better information about it because we're studying subjects that actually have refined their abilities.
And often that's through meditation, right?
Meditation, but primarily focus, because you don't have to have 40,000 hours of meditation. You don't.
That's good news.
Yeah, you don't. What you really need is just a willingness, because, as an example, a professional athlete or somebody that studies martial arts or studies ballet, they have an injury, and now they can't do martial arts, or they can't do ballet, or they can't participate in their sport. But they sit on the couch and they begin to run through their routines in their mind. They begin to mentally rehearse those routines. That we know now that they're activating the same circuits as if they're actually doing it. So what does that mean? It really means that their brain and body are beginning to change ahead of the event. And the beauty behind that is that you don't need to be someone that has experience in meditation. You just have to have the willingness and the ability to focus your concentration. Now, if we were going to extrapolate on that a little further, unless someone who's doing meditation may be focusing on altruistic ideas, like loving kindness and divinity and gratitude and service, whereas the athlete is focusing on moving his or her body through space and time. But their meditation, the skill is the same. The directive where they're putting their attention is something else. So it's the same ability, the same skill, but it just has to be applied to different concepts, mystical or non-mystical.
Right. I think that answers my next question. I was going to ask, will any type of meditation or focus work, or are certain ways perhaps more effective than others?
Well, I think that there are a lot of paths, but I'm a scientist, so I like to see the effects that take place when you do certain types of meditation, whether it's single focus or single-minded. They tend to produce the most measurable changes, or this concept called rehearsal. So even observing and being present of your breath seems to help the mind and body dramatically. So again, I think it's a triangle, and you enter the triangle from one place. Whether you're breathing, whether you're doing open focus meditation, whether you're doing single-minded meditation, whether you're focusing on nothing, that you have to overcome some aspect of yourself, but as you continue, it all gets to be the same as you move up the scale.
And when we're still in the part of spirituality, meditation, I thought of Osho, who has done a lot in that field. And part of your teaching is to teach us that once you change who you are in a way of thinking, feeling, behaving, then you create a new reality. How does that match with someone like Osho, who says, well, you are already perfect, don't change a thing?
Mm-hmm. Well, the essence of you is perfect.
Yeah.
The essence of who you are is absolutely perfect. But the addictions emotionally, the habits that keep creating the same experiences, that reaffirm those emotions, the attitudes and thoughts that become hardwired in your brain actually serve as a veneer that block the essence of who you are. At the very core of us, we are perfect, but we have to mine for that. We have to make our way back to that. That journey, that inward journey, is the journey back to source. It's back to who we ultimately are. So I don't like to ever lie to myself that who I am is perfect, because not from a judgmental standpoint, but from really a practical standpoint. I want to know practically if I am a child of God, or if I am divine, or if God lives within me, then I better be able to execute that in the plane of demonstration here, right? So whether it's healing myself or healing another, or creating something out of nothing, or living in another dimension, those are all available to us. But we've got to climb out of our attachment and our addiction to this particular world in order to do that. So this is a philosophical understanding, and everybody can tell you, well, this is an illusion, and the essence of who you are is perfect. But really, it isn't an illusion, because if I stepped on your foot and you felt pain, that wouldn't feel like an illusion. Or if we sat out in our bathing suits through the night tonight in this weather, we would feel cold, and that wouldn't be an illusion either.
Yeah.
So that's not an illusion, because we are immersed in the dream. As we begin to evolve our understandings and we begin to have new experiences, then it begins to really alter our perception. And as the emotions are beginning to be removed, and as the habits are beginning to be deconstructed, and the beliefs and thoughts that keep undermining who we are is taken away, and then that essence begins to break through.
So it's really about getting to be congruent with that essence.
It's about getting to the point where you begin to make room for it to consume you, to move through you.
Right, right. And when we have that essence, or that observer, and you've talked today about certain layers that get sort of in the way of reaching that essence, like frustration or anger or envy, or, well, those type of
Survival emotions.
Survival emotions. And that creates sort of a tension field between who we really are in our core and how we want to appear to the world, exactly. And then you teach us to look at that. And is that about including everything that there is? Is that about also including that negative emotions?
I don't know that I would use the word include, in as much as I would use the word observe. So you observe and you accept that aspect of yourself. Then you have to make a decision. Is this loving to me, to live by this? And if we made every choice in our life based on that one simple question, is this loving to me, we would probably live a much happier life. And that isn't a selfish choice. That's actually a selfless choice. And so I don't know that it's really that word, in as much as it really is. I don't know if we include it all, but we observe it from a greater level of mind. And when we observe who we're being from a really objective standpoint, then we can say, wow, now I understand why I keep creating the same life. And so we look at those layers for one simple reason, and that is it's been blocking the flow of the divine through us. You can't tell me that an angry, hateful person has the divine being expressed through them. It's blocking their expression. And you can't say that a person who's gambling and living life on addictive medications or drugs is making room for the divine. So a transformative process when the person makes the decision to no longer be that. This isn't a mystical process. They just stop it. They say, I'm not going to function as this person any longer. And the decision that they make is an experience with a certain amount of energy that begins to rewrite their neurology and biology and chemistry.
It's such an interesting process. And do you think that this is something that will take us a lifetime to, not to get there, but to maintain it? Or can that just happen in a second?
Well, times are changing. And people are waking up. And information is so available right now that we don't have to wait for the mystic or the priest or the holy woman or the medicine woman or medicine man to show us the way. It's all available. The hardest part of all of this is just making the time to do it. To make time for our precious selves to begin to think about a new way of being and creating the life that we want. And people who actually do make the time for it, of course, certain aspects of their life fall apart, but they have to. To make room for something greater. It's happened to me over and over again. But I'm more alive than I've ever been on the journey when you're stepping out into the unfamiliar or the unknown. So most people then are afraid to step into the unknown because they can't predict the unknown. Well, of course, that's what the unknown is about. But if you're living by the hormones of stress, then pretty much survival is all about running from the unknown because you have better chances of surviving if you run from the unknown. I'm saying that the unknown is an adventure. And when you get beyond those addictive emotions, those survival states, then you are poised on a position to begin to create energy, use the energy to create a life that you want.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
It is. And it's like you said, all the information is available for us now. We have YouTube, we have Vimeo, we have all these social media, and where this video is for as well. And now I'm very curious to ask you, what is your message to the world? What is your message to humanity? And how does that come through in your work?
Well, I'm a firm believer in human potential. The reason I got so immersed in all of this is because I think that really we are amazing creatures that can do amazing things, whether we're playing symphony or whether we're composing art or whether we're inventing technology. We are an amazing species, and that, as I said today, that I think that the altered states of consciousness that mystics and holy people spoke about, or charismatic leaders spoke about, are actually the normal states of consciousness, and that the altered states of consciousness are those survival states and stress that keep us afraid, that keep us depressed and sad, that keep us feeling separate from the divine. And so my real interest is to demystify the mystical and hopefully make it so practical that everybody can apply it to their lives. And so my message really is simply to the world is that when we get down to the business of really choosing ourselves, that we all have greatness within us. And that, we are not defined by our genes, that we're not defined by our circuitry in the brain. We are the operator of the brain and body, and that people every day have an opportunity to create a lifetime of their own. And so I want to inspire people that it's possible, and I want to collect enough stories and data to be able to reproduce it enough times that it becomes a very common theme in everybody's lives.
Well, you've sure inspired us today. That's one thing, that's sure. Is this what you create your day for this vision?
This whole experience that I'm in right now has primarily happened to me. So
you haven't created it?
Not intentionally, no. I create a state of being that magnetizes and draws events into my life. But really, I don't really have a lot of interest in material possessions or fame or popularity or any of that. My real interest is in the mystical. My real interest is in those experiences where I have to rethink what time is all about, or experience another level of mind or another dimension that I realize that this place is just one place of many, or having mystical moments where I have an energy move through me that totally changes me. So I like those mystical moments and those amazing experiences, because I think that when that starts happening and it begins to become common, that I'm in the midst of change. So, did I create all of this? I don't think I consciously created it, although I think a lot about it. So, I think a lot about all these things.
Obsessing, like you've told us?
No, I don't think I obsess about it. I think that I make room in my life to contemplate a lot of these things. And I love to read information that's scientific, but I really like to make it really simple for people. So if I read a boring scientific article that I only get one little jewel from, at least I got that one piece of information to apply to a bigger model. So I don't really consciously create events or experiences where I am saying I want to lecture here or I lecture there, in as much as I say that I really have a passion to be the living example of it and hopefully contribute to the whole in some way.
Well, we're very happy that you are doing that.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to tomorrow.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
You're welcome.
to
You're
listen
welcome.
to you. Thank you.
You're welcome.